The human ear. This is the last part on our series on responding to the environment in humans. We started with the nervous system, where we explored the different parts of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Then we went on to explore the structure and functioning of the eye, where we looked at processes such as accommodation and pupillary mechanism. In this series, we are going to look at the human ear, where we are going to explore many different components of it. So this is our approach when it comes to human ear. First of all, you have to know how to draw and label parts of the human ear using a diagram. You have to also know the functions of the parts of the ear. You have to know how it is adapted to perform its functions. And you should also be able to explain the effects of a damaged part of the ear. Remember, explaining actually will earn you a good amount of marks. And then lastly, we have to look at the general functions of the ear, where we're going to describe the process of hearing and the maintenance of balance. So this is a structure, the approach you should take when you are studying the ear. It consists of two main divisions. There's the anatomical part, that's the structure and the functions, and then we have the physiological part that deals with the general functions, the hearing process, and the maintenance of balance. But then the final part, just as we did under the nervous system and the eye, deals with disorders or defects of the ear. And mind you, I'm following the examination guidelines and the annual teaching plan, the ATP, according to CAPS regulations. So before we zoom in, let us explore the two main types of stimuli that is recognized under the examination guide and the ATP. We have here light as a stimulus, and this is detected by receptors in the eye, specifically rods and cones. So it's not just the eye that detects light. There are special receptors in it called rods and cones. These receptors are situated in the retina, and they are responsible for detecting light stimulus. The second stimulus related to the topic I'm covering today is sound. Sound as a stimulus is detected by a special receptor in the ear called organ of Corti. We're going to later explore the ear is not only responsible for detecting sound, it is also involved in the maintenance of balance. As we continue, I want us to explore the structural integrity and design of the ear for detecting sound. For the ear to detect sound, we have to know the properties of sound. So one, sound is a mechanical wave, and thus it requires a medium to travel through, or it cannot be propagated in a vacuum. You can't hear sound in space because there is no air to transmit it. And as such, it requires a medium. A medium can be air, it can be water, it can be anything that is in the form of solid, liquid, or gas to actually transmit it. It is propagated through a medium, just as I said, like air, water, or solids. And this is achieved through vibration of particles. Moreover, sound has amplitude, that is loudness, and it can be measured. It is measured in decibels. Larger amplitude will produce louder sound, and a smaller amplitude will produce a very low sound. It can be amplified. In other words, sound can be made louder because it has speed, and its speed varies by medium. whether it is traveling through air, that is through a gas, through solid or liquid. It is also affected by temperature, density, and elasticity. And then finally, sound can be reflected, refracted, and diffracted. That is, when it comes to reflection of sound, it will lead to the bouncing of its particles or of its wave on the surface. It will generate an echo. Refraction of sound involves bending of sound waves due to changes in the medium or the temperature it finds itself in. The diffraction of sound involves spreading it around an obstacle or through opening. So now that we know the properties of sound, we have to now know how you design a structure that can actually detect it. And the natural structure that is actually designed to detect sound uh, is actually an ear. And we humans, we have two of it. We have two ears. All living things across the wildlife have two ears. So this will take us through the structure of the human ear and the functions of the different parts. And in doing so, you have to use a diagram. I recommend the use of your notes, refer to your notes for the diagram or the MTG. So let us look at the different parts of the ear, and then we'll go on to its functions and adaptation. So we have, starting here, we have the part we always see, what we call ear, actually is the pinna. So the pinna forms part of the outer ear, and then just within it, we have the ear canal, and the ear canal leads to the tympanic membrane. And the tympanic membrane is in contact with three bone structures called ossicles. The first one is called hammer, the second one is called anvil, and the last one is called stirrup. Then, if we look further, you can see just below the ossicles, we have the eustachian tube. And then outside the eustachian tube, and also beyond the oval window and the round window, we have these three structures here. These structures, they look like tubes. They are actually semicircular in appearance, and they are actually oriented or positioned at right angles to each other, and that is what is called the semicircular canals. These forms part of the inner ear. Then from the semicircular canals, we have the cochlea. And the cochlea and the semicircular canals are connected to special nerves called auditory nerves. It is advisable to practice how to label the parts of the ear. If you are very serious about learning it, you can even draw it from the scratch and then label it and then state the functions as well. So here we have a detailed parts of the human ear, the functions, and then we also have the adaptations, as well as an explanation on the consequence of some part of it if it is damaged. So let us start first with the outer part of the ear, the part that we see, and that is the pinna, that is A. So what is the functions of the pinna? It directs waves to the tympanic membrane. So the functions of the pinna is that it directs waves into the tympanic membrane. And how is it designed or adapted or built to perform this function? So here is the answer. It is grooved, hence it directs sound waves. And then secondly, it is situated on the outside to capture maximum sound waves. So that is how the pinna is actually adapted or designed to perform its functions. Now we go on to a contextual situation where we have to explain uh, what are the consequences of a cut pinna. If your pinna is cut off, what will be the consequence? Here are the possible consequences. sound waves will not be transmitted properly into the tympanic membrane, and it may lead to hearing loss. But remember, the function of the pinna is to direct sound waves to the tympanic membrane. Hence, if it is cut off, then what's going to happen? You take the functions of the pinna and then you negate it. How do you negate the statement? Is by inserting the phrase will not. Just two words will satisfy the explanation. So sound waves will not be transmitted properly into the tympanic membrane. It may lead to hearing loss, not definitively saying the person will be deaf. It may, there's a possibility. Then we go on to B. After the pinna, we go to the ear canal, also called the auditory canal. What does it do? Its role is to direct sound waves to the tympanic membrane, or what is called tympanum or eardrum. So that is the functions of the ear canal. The ear canal is there to transmit sound waves to the tympanic membrane. So here we would also want to know what will happen if it is blocked. If this section of the ear is filled with wax and it becomes hardy or becomes very hard and blocks the passage, what will be the consequence? So to answer that, you have to just negate this statement. You have to negate the functions here. We know now the ear canal is supposed to direct sound waves to the tympanic membrane. Hence, if it is blocked, it will not be able to direct sound waves to the tympanic membrane. And then we go on to the eardrum. The eardrum is the same as the tympanic membrane, or in short, tympanum. The function is to vibrate. It vibrates and converts sound waves into vibration. So its functions is to vibrate so that it will convert sound waves into vibration. And then it passes on the vibrations to the ossicles. So that the tympanic membrane, it is in contact with the ossicles. And we have to look at adaptation. How is it designed to perform its functions? One, it is thin. It is a thin membrane which can vibrate. And then secondly, it also assists in amplification of sound. Amplification here means making sound louder. So the tympanic membrane is designed to assist in sound amplification, and also it is thin so that it can vibrate. Now we have to explore what could happen if it is damaged. Because it is very thin and fragile, it can actually be damaged. So let's look at the situation here. Explain the consequence if the tympanic membrane is damaged or torn. So this is what will happen. Just take the functions and then you have to write the opposite of it. So sound waves, we simply insert the words, will not be converted to vibrations in the ossicles. So what's going to be the consequence? The person will not hear properly, or it may lead to hearing loss. So let's take it again. What are the consequences of a damaged or a torn tympanic membrane? So here are the possible answers. Sound waves will not be converted to vibrations in the ossicles. The person will not hear properly, or it may lead to hearing loss. Good. Now that would lead us to the ossicles. So let's look at the ossicles. This consists of 3 bones. The first one is called hammer. The second one is called anvil. And the third one, which is very small, the smallest among the 3, is called stirrup. So what are the functions of the ossicles? They transmit vibrations to the oval window. So you can see the ossicles are in direct contact with the oval window. That is what you are seeing here. Let's go on. The functions of the ossicles are that it transmits vibration to the oval window. That is one. Two, it amplifies sound. So you can actually tell previously we came across the tympanic membrane, which is also involved in sound amplification. Now we know the main functions of the ossicles is to amplify sound. That is their main responsibility. And then the tympanic membrane assists the ossicles to amplify it. So here, sound needs to be made louder so that you can hear. How will you design the ossicles to transmit vibrations to the oval window and also to amplify sound? So that is the adaptation. And you can actually tell the ossicles are made from bones. And because of that, they are able to carry vibrations. And that is it. Then we go on to the oval window, because the oval window is in direct contact with the stirrup or the stapes. So what is the functions of the oval window? It converts sound vibrations into pressure waves. The oval window is there to convert sound vibrations into pressure waves. So the sound waves comes in and hits the tympanic membrane. The tympanic membrane will now vibrate. The vibration is due to the fact that it converted the sound waves into vibrations which will be channeled or transmitted through the ossicles. The vibrations will cause all the ossicles to also shake, and in doing so, because the ossicles are attached to the oval window too will start shaking or vibrating automatically. And by so doing, the oval window has converted sound waves into pressure waves. So that is what we have here. The oval window is already vibrating in contact together with the ossicles, and by so doing, it converts sound vibrations into pressure waves. They also do something more. They help in sound amplification. This mechanism helps amplification of sound. Now, just below the oval window, we have the round window. So if you look at the round window, it also functions in the following way. It is there to release or absorb pressure waves. It releases or absorbs pressure waves with the aim of preventing internal ear echo. Okay, so the round window, it is there to absorb pressure waves to prevent internal ear echo. Now, just below the round window, we have the eustachian tube. The eustachian tube, what does it do? It connects the mouth to the middle ear. The eustachian tube connects the mouth to the middle ear. And what is its functions? It is there to equalize pressure on either side of the tympanic membrane. So the functions of the eustachian tube is to balance pressure or equalize pressure on each side of the eardrum. It also drains moisture from the middle ear. Don't forget, the eustachian tube connects the mouth directly to the middle ear. Okay, so that is a very important point to take note of. So because the eustachian tube is there to balance pressure on both sides of the eardrum, what will be the consequence if it is blocked? If it is filled with fluid, what will be the consequence? The consequence is the opposite of its function. So you simply have to say it will not be able to equalize pressure on either side of the tympanic membrane, and hence it won't be able to drain moisture from the middle ear. But then you have to go to the first point, because there is something else that could happen. If the eustachian tube is blocked, that means it will not be able to equalize pressure on either side of the tympanic membrane, it will cause the eardrum to burst. So that is one negative consequence of a blocked eustachian tube. Now from here we go on to this structures here called the semicircular canals. So we have the semicircular canals, and it actually they contain a specialized receptor called the cristae. So the cristae, they are involved in the maintenance of balance. And then we also have below it, we have the circulus and the utriculus. They contain a special receptor called the maculae, and the maculae, they are actually also involved, just like the cristae, in the maintenance of balance. Now, there is something more interesting here that we should actually take note of, because we all assume the ear is there to enable us to detect sound. But then, no, the ear performs other functions apart from detecting sound. It is also involved in the maintenance of balance. And if you remember from the nervous system, we realize that the cerebellum is also involved in the maintenance of balance. So, how will you detect sound and how will you maintain balance? If you check here below it, okay, you can see this structure that looks like a snail shell or the shell of a snail. You see, this structure is what is called the cochlea. This structure contains the hearing receptor. Okay, there are several of them, and those receptors are called the organ of Corti. For you to hear sound, you need the organ of Corti. It is not the entire ear alone that allows you to hear. This is the most important organ, the main structure that allows you to hear. That is the organ of Corti. What is its functions? The organ of Corti, it converts pressure waves into a nerve impulse. So that is it here. The organ of Corti converts pressure waves into a nerve impulse. Now we go down. What will be the consequence of a damaged cochlea, or if the organ of Corti is damaged? If the organ of Corti is damaged, then we have to write the opposite of its function. Then we say pressure waves will not. It's still the same function, but we have negated it. We have written the opposite statement of it. And what is the opposite of the functions of the organ of Corti? If it is damaged, pressure waves will not be converted into nerve impulse. And this will lead to, yes, deafness. This is complete deafness if the organ of Corti is damaged. Now, remember I was sharing with you the fact that the ear performs other functions aside detecting sound. And over here, we saw from the semicircular canal and the circulus and the utriculus that it is involved in the maintenance of balance. So here is the thing. For you to hear, you need your brain, because it is only the cerebrum and then the other parts of the brain, the cerebellum, that are actually involved in interpreting impulses or stimuli from the environment. Hence, if we check carefully, you will discover that we have these lines that look like threads, the thread-like lines. Some are connected to the cochlea, some are also connected to the semicircular canals, and also the circulus and the utriculus. What are these lines here? These lines represent the auditory nerve. Specifically, we are looking at sensory neuron. What is the functions of the auditory nerve? It transmits impulses from the cochlea to the cerebrum. Remember, when we were studying the central nervous system, we explored the brain, and it has a wider or a larger part called the cerebrum. The cerebrum is involved in the interpretation of sensation from the sense organ, and the ear is one of the sense organ. And for you to hear sound, it will take the cerebrum to actually interpret the impulse coming from the auditory nerve. the auditory nerve transmits impulses from the cochlea to the cerebrum if you have to hear sound. But then over here, we saw that the ear is also involved in the maintenance of balance. So how will you maintain the balance? The part of the brain responsible for hearing is different from the part of the brain responsible for maintaining balance. So over here, when it comes to hearing, the cerebrum is responsible. But then what about balance? For you to maintain your balance, guess what? The auditory nerve, it will transmit impulses from the semicircular canals you see here, and then it will take it straight to the cerebellum. You see here, we don't have the cerebrum. The cerebrum is for hearing, but then this time, if the impulse is coming from the semicircular canal, it goes through the auditory nerve, enters the brain, and goes to the cerebellum, because the cerebellum is responsible for maintaining balance. If the auditory nerve is damaged, what will be the consequence? So for you to know the consequence, you just have to take the functions of the auditory nerve and negate it, write it in the opposite. So what will be the consequence of a damaged auditory nerve? If the auditory nerve is damaged, then it will not be able to transmit impulses from the cochlea to the cerebrum. That means the person will not be able to hear, or it will lead to deafness. Secondly, if it is damaged, then the auditory nerve will not be able to transmit impulses from the semicircular canals and then to the cerebellum. That means the person will not be able to maintain his or her balance. So all of you are given these notes, and you're supposed to study thoroughly, memorize it, and practice it perfectly. You should even learn how to draw the ear. Here it has been simplified. You can draw and label and state the functions as well as the adaptation. One last thing before we conclude, let us look at this statement here. Explain the consequence for hearing if structures labeled D are fused. Fused means they are joined together, making them immobile or immovable. So what is structure D? So if you go carefully, you can see structure D represents the ossicles. So here is saying what will be the consequence for hearing if it is actually fused. So here are the answers. The ossicles or structures will not be able to vibrate, and hence no vibrations will be passed to the inner ear. And it continues to say the cochlea will not be stimulated, hence no amplification will occur. If there is no amplification, it is most likely the person will lose his hearing, or the person may not be able to hear properly. So we have already gone through the entire concept. We have actually looked at the parts, functions, and adaptations of the ear. So that is the sequence or the learning pattern. You must always know the parts. You must also always know the functions. You must know the adaptations. And then you should be able to explain the effects if that part is damaged. And in doing so, you take the functions and then you insert the words will not be able. Once you insert these words, you have explained the consequence of that damaged part. Okay, so now let us go on to the different sections of the ear. The ear is divided into three parts: the outer ear, and here we have the outer ear, which consists of the pinna, the auditory, and the auditory canal. And then we have the middle ear. The middle ear consists of the tympanic membrane, eustachian tube, then the ossicles, starting with the hammer, anvil, stirrup. For you to remember the names of these three bones, just use their first letters, H, A, S. It forms the word has. So once you are actually required to supply or provide the names of these three bones, or the names of the bones of the ossicles in their order, you just use the word has, where H stands for hammer, H and the A stand for anvil, and the S stand for stirrup. The stirrup is in direct contact with the oval window. Below it, we have the round window. These are the components of the middle ear. Down, the three ossicular bones are of great interest. So this is actually a wider display of those bones. You can actually tell the first one is also called malleus. The second one is called incus. The last one is called the stapes. If you put those first letters of each word together, you form another word, miss. I will advise you to stick to one wording system instead of using an alternative one, like the one we saw earlier on, where we have the hammer, anvil, and stirrup, and their first letters forms the word has. This is a code that will help you to remember the names during exams. This is the inner ear, and this is a visual of how hearing is achieved. So over here, the sound wave comes in and hits against the tympanic membrane, and then it will cause it to vibrate, converting sound waves into vibrations. Now you can actually see the moment the sound wave hits against the tympanic membrane, the ossicle bones began to also shake, because the ossicle bones are in contact with the tympanic membrane and as well as the round window. And the round window is also part of the inner ear that is actually linked to the cochlea. The cochlea is fluid filled. So the moment the sound waves hits against the tympanic membrane, the bones began to hit against each other, and by so doing, the stirrup begins to hit against the round window, and this creates a kind of pressure waves inside the fluid-filled cochlea, and then the organ of Corti, which has some hair-like structures in them, will just move or vibrate. And as they vibrate, they generate an impulse, and the impulse is then transmitted along the auditory nerve here, as you are seeing, and it goes straight to the cerebrum for interpretation. We have the inner ear here, and then over here we have the semicircular canals, we have the vestibule, and then we have the cochlea. Inside the cochlea, there is the organ of Corti. So the ear of human, or the human ear, functions in two ways. One, it is involved in hearing, but when it comes to hearing, the part of the ear responsible for hearing is the organ of Corti. The human ear is also involved in the maintenance of balance. But then the part of the ear responsible for maintaining balance are the maculae and then the cristae. Good. So, according to the exams guide, you don't have to know the details of the structure of the cristae here. We have only the structural adaptation. So when it comes to the semicircular canals, it consists of three semicircular canals, and they are arranged at right angles to each other. They are located above the vestibule, and each canal has an enlarged area. That enlarged area is called the ampulla, and that is at one end. Then inside the ampulla, there are receptors. These receptors are called cristae. Now, what is the functions of the cristae? That will take us here. This is the role of the cristae. It detects changes in speed and direction. So if you are walking or running or moving, or when you're in a car, you can actually know how fast the car is moving without checking the speedometer, because the cristae inside your inside your semicircular canals, they are able to detect changes in speed and also direction. And then by so doing, by the movement of it, they generate impulses, which is sent to the cerebellum, because the cerebellum is responsible for the maintenance of balance. Then we go to the maculae. That one too, you don't have to know the details of its structure for examination purposes according to the rules. And this is the vestibule where in which you find the maculae. Over here, it is made up of two membranous sacs, and these two membranous sacs, they are called circulus and utriculus. Both sacs are filled with a fluid. This fluid is called endolymph. So there are two membranous sacs, meaning the sacs are very thin and fragile. And one is called circulus, the other one is called utriculus. And inside them is a fluid called endolymph. Now, inside each sacs are special receptors called the maculae. The maculae, inside it are tiny hair cells, and they are covered with jelly-like substances. And they, on top of the jelly-like substance, are tiny calcium carbonate stones. They are like crystals. And what they do is that the maculae is there to detect changes in the position of the head with respect to gravity. That is, when you nod your head up and down, the crystals, the crystals of calcium carbonate stones begin to move, or they change position, and by so doing, it will cause the tiny hair-like structures inside the maculae to also move or vibrate. As they vibrate, they generate an impulse, and the impulse is transmitted along the auditory nerve. But this time, it doesn't go to the cerebrum, because the cerebrum is responsible for interpreting sensation from the sensory organ. However, the impulse from the auditory nerve coming from the maculae, it goes to the cerebellum, and the cerebellum will tell you the position of your head. If your head is facing down, or if your head is facing up, the Christie will also be able to tell. It is also able to tell when you turn your head sideways. So that is the functions of the maculae. It is there to detect the position of the head with respect to gravity. Gravity pulls on these calcium carbonate stones, and the hair-like structures below it actually responds to those changes. Then we go on to the organ of Corti, and again, you don't have to know the details of its structure. All you have to know is that it is divided into three chambers. The upper and the lower chambers, they are filled with a special fluid called the perilymph. So these forms more or less like the outer layer, outer chambers. And then the middle chamber is filled with endolymph, because endo means inside, and that is the middle part of the three-chambered structure. And this chamber, that's the middle chamber, contains the organ of Corti. The organ of Corti contains tiny hairs, and these tiny hairs are embedded into a membrane. And what does it do? The organ of Corti is a receptor. It is responsible for interpreting sound. And this is how it functions. It converts the stimulus of sound into an impulse, and the impulse is transmitted straight to the cerebrum for interpretation. Then we go on to the hearing process. Because we have to actually explore the general functions of the ear, that is balancing hearing. So let's start with hearing. What is hearing? Hearing is a process in which sound waves are transmitted through the ear and impulses are generated, which are sent to the cerebrum for interpretation. Then we need to know the role of the organ of Corti in hearing. Always know the organ of Corti is always connected to hearing. So here we are. The organ of cochlea is in the middle chamber of the cochlea. Okay, when the organ of cochlea in the middle chamber of the cochlea is stimulated, when vibrating oval window causes pressure waves to travel through the endolymph in the cochlea. Let's take it again. The organ of cochlea in the middle chamber of the cochlea, it is stimulated, it comes alive. It is stimulated or it becomes active when vibrating oval window causes pressure waves to travel through the endolymph of the cochlea. But the cochlea is filled with a fluid called endolymph. The moment the stapes hits against the oval window and the oval window begins to vibrate, the vibration creates a wave pattern, like when you drop a stone in water, it creates a wave. This wave pattern travels through the endolymph in the cochlea. And then what will happen is that the stimulus is then converted into a nerve impulse. The movement of the hairs in the organ of cochlea creates an impulse. And then this impulse is then transmitted to the auditory nerve. And then the auditory nerve will transmit the impulse to the cerebrum for interpretation. So this is actually a three-staged mechanism that allows us to hear. That will take us to the detailed process on how hearing occurs. So this is how we hear sound. First of all, sound waves are directed into the auditory canal by the pinna. And then the sound waves make the tympanic membrane vibrate. Then the vibrations are passed on to the ossicles in the middle ear. The ossicles make the oval window to vibrate, and this causes pressure waves to be set up in the inner ear. And then lastly, these vibrations also cause the organ of cochlea to be stimulated, and then it generates impulses which are sent to the cerebrum along the auditory nerve. And finally, the cerebrum interprets the impulses as sound. So that is a detailed process. Now, such question demands that you write the steps involved in hearing. And this is something you need to practice. You have to memorize for examination purposes. Then we go on to the maintenance of balance. This is a description of how maintenance of balance is achieved. So first and foremost, balance is a process in which receptors in the inner ear detect changes in the position of the head and respond to gravity as well as changes in speed, direction of the body. So how is balance achieved? Balance is brought about by the cristae, ampullae of the semicircular canals, and then the maculae in the circulus and utriculus. So the cristae is in the ampullae of the semicircular canals, and the maculae are in the circulus and the utriculus. So let's look at the detailed process of maintenance of balance. So this is how it starts. The cristae in the semicircular canals are stimulated by changes in the direction and speed of movement. And the maculae in the circulus and the utriculus are stimulated by changes in the position of the head. When stimulated, when both of them are stimulated, that is, when they are stimulated, the cristae and the maculae, what they do is that they convert the stimuli received into a nerve impulse. The nerve impulses are then transported along the auditory nerve to the cerebellum to be interpreted. Then what will happen? The cerebellum then sends impulses to the muscles to restore balance. So this is just a simple approach when it comes to the description of the maintenance of balance. Know the functions of the cristae, which is involved in the direction and speed movement. Know also the location, because the cristae is in the semicircular canals. Maculae is also involved in balance, but guess what? It is actually located in the circulus and utriculus, and it is involved in changes in the position of the head. And their functions are actually unified here as their impulses are transmitted along the same channel, that is, along the same auditory nerve, and then it goes straight to the cerebellum, and the cerebellum will now interpret it and sends information to the muscle, because movement in the human body are coordinated by muscles under the influence of the cerebellum. So you need to practice this process all over too. It is very short and simple, and it is something you can do. Now, we will conclude this section with knowing the hearing defects within humans, that is, disorders of the ear. And over here, there are only 2 of them. So we're going to start with middle ear infection. So you have to know about the infection. You have to know what it is. You have to know the cause. So what is the cause of middle ear infection? It is due to excess fluid, okay, filling up the middle ear, okay. That is, excess fluid is in the middle ear, and this is caused by pathogen infection. A pathogen can be a bacteria or a virus, or it can be any microorganisms that causes diseases. And then you need to know the treatment. How do you treat middle ear infection? Middle ear infection is treated by inserting grommets. If that is not enough, you can antibiotics are also used. So you need to know the defect, the cause, and the treatment. Then we go on to deafness. What are the causes of deafness? So 1, we have injury to parts of the ear, nerves, or parts of the brain responsible for hearing. So deafness may come about if any part of the ear, such as the organ of Corti or the cochlea or the oval window, is damaged. It can also be due to a damage to the nerves. And here it could be the sensory neuron, because the sensory neuron is actually the main neuron that forms the auditory nerve. If it is not any part of the ear, or if it's not the sensory neuron, it could be any part of the cerebrum, because the cerebrum is involved in the interpretation of sensations from the sense organs, and the ear is actually a sense organ. Moreover, too, other causes of deafness could be hardened wax, because our ear canal gets filled with wax from time to time. It is part of the immune response. But if that wax is not actually cleared or removed and it hardens, it could actually block the ear canal. And if you block the ear canal, that means the ear canal will not be able to transmit sound waves into the tympanic membrane, and it could lead to deafness. Lastly, the hardening of ear tissues, such as the ossicles. That is, if the ossicles becomes fused and it ceases to vibrate, or it does not vibrate anymore, it could also lead to deafness. What are the treatments? These conditions can be treated using hearing aids or cochlear implants. Use cochlear implants if the cochlea is totally damaged, or if the organ of Corti in the cochlea is totally damaged. So that is a presentation on the human ear. Thank you very much for joining me. Make sure you go through the notes all over again and practice all the processes and the labeling of the parts and the functions. And I wish you all the best.